Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Perry Wong of the Milken Institute. Can you give us any insight into the methodology? What are the criteria you use? You talked a little bit about innovation, you talked a little bit about openness, but what else goes into it?
Actually, we primarily use some of the everyday, I think, as an economist, with data that we look at, from income, wage income, to population base, to gross domestic product for the regions, and also foreign direct investments. So with those mix of data, we make a composition on some of them. So we would look at the longer term growth potential, meaning we look back in history and look at how stable that growth is. That's a very important one because you don't want one region to grow by rank number one, right, and next year drop down to 50. So we would like to look at the average growth, which is give you a gauge on the momentum. And we also look at some of the newer nuances on the region, such as what's the yearly growth last year vis-a-vis the year before on wage, on job changes. Then we look at something very fundamental as what we see the openness of the economy by hot statistics, the amount of FDI coming in, the growth momentum, is there increment or decline? That's one. And second, we will look at the ratio between the FDI relations to outputs. So how much output is based on FDI?
Okay.
So is it 10% or 20%?
Okay, I have a difficult question for you. I'm going to pose this now. Especially in the West, people say that IP, intellectual property, has been stolen by the Chinese. Mm-hmm. How much of stolen IP accounts for the rise of places like Shenzhen in China?
I would suspect, formally or informally, quite a bit. Because I think the IP thing is, you look at one end, would be I copy someone's product without paying, but I'm not copying 100%. So this is what the Chinese word is famous by saying 山寨 something, meaning you are not making a product identical, say, to iPhone, but in every sense, it behaves or looks like, but not exactly the same thing as iPhone. So how much IP is stolen from there is hard to say. I think it's up to Apple and the maker to say, you actually copy shape by shape, line by line. Now that's a hard violation. But saying in terms of copying idea, intangible thing, is very difficult to quantify from that end. And mind you that technology has a very perverse channel in spilling over. Now that is something very difficult to capture. I think the lawyer can argue that in the court case on how much you copy, how much you should pay me. I think that's what Silicon Valley is famous for.
What do you see as the next steps for this new Chinese economy? Because I've just talked about stolen IP, but obviously with 5G, it's apparent that China's now catching its own steam and own wind and has its own research. So what do you think is the future?
I think the future is that China, I think with its size of economy and with the hunger, I think most importantly, people never quite understand. But I think for people who have the quest or desire to be better, I think you can only see that effort to be intensified, government or otherwise, it doesn't matter. I think part of the China, if you look at a city like Shenzhen or Chengdu or Shanghai, some of the better known ones, and lately Hangzhou is another one, Suzhou is another, so on and so forth. So you see more cities like that are climbing the technology path. I think technology perhaps is the showcase of that process. But in me, by doing my analysis, I'm thinking about the innovative process and desire. It can be policy, it can be how the city is managed, that matters. So it's not just how they make that piece of gadget. I think the question is beyond that. So that's something I think many Americans miss the point, that they look at the product and say, you copy that. But I think the better question is, are Chinese being more innovative in coming up with solutions, how to make things better? That is uniquely Chinese economy, just as well as Chinese cannot copy how American does things.
Now, the name of this program is The Point, and you just gave us an example of Americans missing the point regarding Chinese technology. So regarding your study this year, Best Performing Cities China. What is the one main message or main point you want to leave the audience with?
I think I'll make two. How about that? One, I think China is still driven by policy because the regional growth among the entire landscape is very uneven. So you can see the tangible hand, namely the government one, that are driving some of the growth in places such as Guiyang. Guiyang have been up and down, but for centuries has been always the poorest place in China. And now the light just shine on them because that region offered the best geography for data storage. So you can see almost the top 10 global technology company are building up their data storage in that particular city, inside the mountain. Natural cooling. That's a very cool place. So that's one, policy driven. Also on the other point, I think even more important moving forward, is that you can see cities such as Hangzhou or Shenzhen or Suzhou, that you can see that those cities already built up their city culture. So they have their own thing of doing things. And you can see more endogenous, internal driven type of innovation and growth. That's what we are looking for. I mean, government is so easy to predict. You can see this 5 years, I'm going to allocate that much capital to that region. And you can, predictably, you see the labor going to that place. You see that building are putting up. But then I think, deep down, if you will look for 5 years, 10 years out, the faith of the region, okay, the prosperity of the region, actually is how the city built up its culture. Culture meaning also embodiment of entrepreneurship. And Shenzhen is, I think, being the highlight, if you will, a shining place in China, that people are coming from every corner in China, and you can also say from Silicon Valley today now, that they are making their own culture. They actually are outward looking, not because they want to sell cheap good, but they think they have the confidence to make something happen. And that's actually what I'm looking for.
Thanks very much, Perry.
You're welcome.
And that's the point. Please follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter for future episodes and so that we can continue the dialogue. Thank you.